In this walkthrough, I'm going to show you how to get from start to finish on a retro title in minutes. Nostalgia is an After Effects template collaboration between myself and Ezra Cohen. If you haven't purchased it just yet, stick around anyway because I know you'll pick up a few tips and tricks on how to create 70s and 80s titles. We've worked really hard to keep it simple, making it easy to customize, change fonts, change colors, change text, add footage, and make it yours. In case you were wondering, no, I'm not Ezra Cohen. Yes, this is an Australian accent. My name is Grant M Fletcher. I'm a creative director, tool visuals designer, After Effects enthusiast for well over a decade. But enough chat, let's open up this project file. There's so many amazing looks for you to choose from, and they're just crazy easy to use. Even if you never use AE, they're organized so that each of the titles has a text edit comp, and then there's a final export comp. So let's take a look at one, say this number 13, which I've called Nostalgia. You'll see that here's what the final product looks like. Say we want to change the text and font. Well, we just click in the text window, we change it up, and boom, you're right back in 1975, just like that. Speaking of fonts, I have used quite a few fonts, as you can tell. Here's a list of the ones I've used if you want to use them for any other projects. The good news is they're all free in the Adobe Font Kit, which is really easy to link up. So once you're going with all that, I've included some other little details for you. There's these text details. Ez has donated some bonus assets taken from real VHS, 16mm and 35mm stock. There's some looks for, furthering that kind of VHS aesthetic, 16mm aesthetic. But let's jump even further into this project and I'll show you just how easy it is to customize all these looks and make them your own. This time, let's look at changing the color. We'll go to Text Edit 1. So we've got Change Text here, where, as you know, we can change the text and the font. And just below that, it says Change Color here. It's a solid. Let's click on the color controls. There's two because it's a ramp. Let's change one to maybe, I don't know, like a seafoam green, and then the other to cyan. We'll jump over to the export composition, and there you have it. It has these effects all ready to go. It even has this little shine that runs across it. So on the surface, these look pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of comps going on here, but that's because I'm using the shy switch, which hides a bunch of stuff. So if I click on that, now you can see a little bit more of what's going on. So I'm using noise in most of these. Now, it's really good for helping you render out, especially with something like a H.264 that can become quite pixelated. The noise just forces the render to render more of the pixels because they're changing more often. That's how H.264s work. Then under that, we've got this 4:3 letterbox, which is one of the details. So if I turn that off, you'll be able to see the full 16:9 comp and you can export it like that. We've got some of the stock footage that Ezra Cohen has graciously given us for free in this project. So transition 1 on the front and the back of the comp is, this really noisy VHS. I've got a layer here specifically for the displacement, which I'll show you in a minute. Then another VHS overlay, which is just a regular overlay. We've got some 16mm texture and some 35mm grain. It was maybe first filmed on 35mm, or maybe the title sequence was made at a studio that was maybe shooting it on 16mm, or however they were scanning it. So we end up with a few more things here. So the 16mm texture then got scanned in as a VHS. So we've got that under there, and the effects, every single comp has completely different effects going on. In this case, you can see just the VHS warp running down like a wave. This displacement map is displacing the VHS lines that are coming across the screen here and here. It's actually also pushing the footage. You can see little notches there. That's what that's doing. The Gaussian blur is just a blur, but VHS and 16mm and other stuff like that, older stock, really does not look as sharp as what we're used to seeing now in the digital world. So don't be scared if this stuff is like really blurry and messed up. We've got a radial blur, which is kind of blurring more in the edges than it is in the middle. We've got a unsharp mask. It sounds kind of funny, but I will blur stuff and then sharpen it again because it just really makes it look really crusty, and VHS had this weird kind of sense of sharpening. There's another noise layer and then posterized time. So this title sequence in particular, I've used a lower frame rate. So instead of being 24 frames, it's at 12 frames. And then below here, we've split the RGB. If I zoom in a little bit, you'll be able to see some of the fringing here. You've got blue there, green there, and that's what this RGB split is doing. So that's the red layer, the green layer, and the blue layer. So I use the shy button here to really make it easier to understand what you're looking at, help you get to the things you need to quicker. And really in this case, all you want to do is either use the 4:3 box or switch it on or off. You know, believe it or not, one of the things that I've worked the hardest on during this project is glows. They're very hard to get right, and also the native After Effects glow is pretty terrible in a couple of ways. And one of them is that if you want to put something in a pre-comp and then bring it into another comp or export it as an alpha, you get this really bad black background. So have a look around in the different comps. I've made glows in various different ways. Let's look at a composition now that has multiple text layers like this Shinjuku Enterprises. We've got the green here and we've got the white Enterprises and then the kanji here at the top that apparently says Shinjuku. I Googled it, so who knows if it's actually correct. Well, let's change text edit 1. So let's change this to say Tokyo. We'll jump into text edit 2 and we can see a few things here. We can see this Tokyo from the other comp. Now, that's not actually something that's going to render out. I'm using what's called a guide layer. If you don't use guide layers a lot, it really just means a layer that's not going to render out. It can look exactly the same as the original layer, but it's not going to render out. And the way to do that is to go right-click on it and click guide layer. And so you could do that with footage. You can do that with text layers. It's just a way to create guides, like say you used an image as a guide layer with a grid on it or something, without it actually rendering out, without you needing to switch it off before you render. So now I want to make that line up with the layer above it. So now that we've made it line up, we go back out to export. So by now you know what's up. That's what it looks like. I can hit export, but what if I want to add footage to this scene? So let's pick another one. I'm going to go to freestyle over here. I'm straight away going to change the text to say cowboy. So instead of needing you to just drag, footage in or export it as an alpha, there's some options in most of these export comps. At the moment, we've got this gradient background that's got like a really subtle, kind of blue ramp going on there. You can also instead switch on just a black background, which I've also put in there. And then underneath that, there is a footage minimal effects and footage effects. So I've got footage, double click on that, that opens the footage. So let's drag some footage onto here, and this footage is in HD. All of the comps in this are in 4K. Don't worry about scaling stuff up. 80s and 70s stuff is blurry, noisy, so you're really not going to tell at the end of it, especially with the amount of just effects that I have caked this comp in. So scale it up. Don't cry, everything's going to be all right. Let's go back to that export comp and see what happened. There we go. There's the footage underneath. Oh, it says cowboy and she's doing a bit of a hair flick. So maybe it should say cowgirl. Wait, I'm going to have to change it. And rendered. Okay. Whoa, that was Barbie. Okay. I took it too far. Anyway, so you've got this minimal effects version, which is just pretty much the footage with no effects. I say minimal effects though, because when we turn off the shy layer, you can see there's flicker, jitter, the stock footage, the noise. There's a lot of stuff going on there that will affect that layer. But then let's turn shy off. If I flick that off, underneath here is a footage effects comp. And so this will, in every single comp, I've created a completely customized look for that title. So in this case, you can see there's a little bit of a glow in the highlights, and there might be, the blacks aren't as crushed. So there you have it. Now you've got a cowgirl flicking her hair, and you can just hit, again, export, and it will all be within the title. It'll have all the grains, the blurs, everything that you need ready to go. So from here, let's look at a few exceptions to the simplicity. The first one here, chroma, right? So let's go to text edit. This one's a little bit different. Shy Switch says change the text here, right? So I can do that. I can just say change me. If I go out to the export comp, so that's all good. But then what if I go into this text edit here and I want to change, say, the size of it and the font of it? It starts to get a little bit trickier in this case. So let's turn off the shy layer. Because I got this fade through red, if you've never noticed on old films, often when they would fade text from white to black, it would actually go through a color. It's just a little subtlety. Go back and watch some title sequences and notice that. And also there's got this rainbow echo going on. And so these are both linked to this text layer through an expression, but the size isn't linked and the font isn't linked. So if you did want to change all three of these to, say, a different font, you would go in here and select the font for all three, and it would be absolutely fine. So that's how you do that. Let's look at one of our 3D text comps. So here we have I've called this one heavy metal. It's actually 3D, and most people don't know you can do 3D within After Effects. It's not 2.5D. There's no trick in this one. This is actually 3D, and the reason why is it's using the Cinema 4D renderer in the composition settings, which, you don't have to understand what I'm saying there, but just know that this is actually 3D, which is super cool that you can do this in AE now. So again, you can change this to say whatever you want. And again, you can change the color here. So that's the base color. And what this is actually doing is it's actually reflecting something. So I've got a reflection layer set up. That's what this little weird symbol here is, which I've called environment in the pre-comps. So there's a background, which is, the background. Because in this case, there's a lot of lightning. Let's see if we can find some. Oh, that was easy. So you can see the lightning here is in both the background and in the environment. You can see here that there's actually a reflection of some lightning, and sometimes, it reflects in different parts of the text. So here's one of my favorite comps. I've made this 3D VHS box, just like the ones you would see in the ads in the 90s for like an aerobics class or something. And the cool thing about this is you can actually edit what's on the box. So you've got the front here, you've got the, the spine. That's what you call it in a book anyway. You actually can see the back as well for a split second. So let's go into box edit, and here is the layout. So we've got this VHS box here. If I turn that off, it's just without the texture, which doesn't look nearly as cool. And then everything in here that I've got at the moment is just almost like I've used this almost like Photoshop, and I've just made a bunch of stuff. You can, delete all of this and just do your own thing. You could just go bam and then start, designing whatever you want. But there's a few things in here that are useful. So I've got this VHS logo, which is one of the details, which I'll talk about in a second. And we've got the pre-comp rainbow, which you've seen in a bunch of the other compositions. They're all using the same pre-comp. That's just something that you can edit really, really easily. And again, with this, you've got the background, which is that gradient that kind of slowly fades up. So there's some keyframes in there, this color in the background. There's also just a version that's like a fill color. In this case, I feel like so many of those ads had this really random bright blue, so that's the color there. You can just see some yellow text off to the side. That would be typical. Another example similar to that is this TV. So it's a comp here, and then if you go to on screen, you can put anything here. You don't have to keep this text. You don't have to keep this background. You could just put footage in it. So let's chuck that nested sequence from before. Let's go fit to height, and then let's jump out to the export and see what it looks like. So there you have it. She's on TV, and there's a little bit of fringing and a little bit of RGB separation going on there. And if you wanted, you thought, it needs to look worse, you can even go into the on-screen and start, putting some noise and texture on that, or, do your animation over it, whatever you want. There is a couple of fonts in here that have special glyphs though, and sadly After Effects does not allow us to change these special glyphs within AE. If you look at this H, I don't know of a way to change that H within After Effects or that T because there's multiple versions of said H. The other examples of this would be within ITC Avant-Garde, these cool A's that slant, the same with M, their M's slant as well. And then in this funky Dory font here, I've got these S's and N's, and you can see there's these little swooshes. Now, that doesn't just come normally. So let me show you what I mean. We're about to create a train wreck. So let's just type train wreck. So there you go. That's what that train wreck looks like, which isn't great. So you can either change the font to something, you know, a little bit easier to work with, or what I've been doing is I've been using Adobe Illustrator to do these little swooshes. So if I open up Illustrator and I paste this little text in here, what I can now do with this is I can change these glyphs. So maybe I want to just select that A, and it will give me a few selections down here. Maybe I just want a normal A. The train's now looking pretty good. So say I just want to like push this across, and do we need a less crazy W? That fits. So that's what I'm looking for. I need this to be normal. Probably can't fit anything crazy with that. Maybe the C needs to be a little bit more regular as well. So now I can pull back a few spaces, and there we go. Like that's kind of a logo S looking train wreck. Maybe this N has a crazy glyph. What have we got here? Too much. Yeah, that's a bit nutso. So there you go. Now it looks like that. So then I can take this piece of text, I can copy it, and I can paste it back into After Effects like so. And so I'm going to use my align tool to center that. Then when I go to the export comp, as you can see, it's all changed. So that's what you want to do with weird glyphs. If you look at ITC Avant-Garde Gothic, for example, you've got normal W, and then you've got cool W. So it allows you to do that with W's and A's in this font, which is one of my favorites. So say you don't want to export it with a black background or footage, you actually want to bring it into your program of choice and overlay it over footage. Here's how to do it. All of the comps that don't have this little red marker at this point in time, so there's a few there, they all have what's called a alpha export. So what that means is it's usually just the composition with minimal amount of effects on it. So really not my favorite way for you to export it, but if that's what you need, that's what it's got. And some look better than others, but what you're going to be missing out on is your 16mm stock, your VHS stock. A lot of your displacements and blurs are gone because of that as well. So it's just a way more stripped back version of the export. But hey, you know, that might be the look. You might not be going full 80s or full 70s. And so this would be a great option for you. So you just scroll down and you can do the normal text edit, and then you go to export alpha, and it will give you an export with a few less of the features. Here's another idea. Instead of using footage in the footage comp, why not use some of our other motion design assets? Here is a file from the collab I did with Ez called Chroma, which just so happens to have a sweet DeLorean in it for a comp called DeLorean. So I chuck in the DeLorean and I go to my export comp. I'm going to turn off the background layer, and there we go. I've got DeLorean over DeLorean over DeLorean over DeLorean. So that's another thing you can do with these titles. You can stack up anything from Ezra's store. This is from the Chroma pack. So the Chroma pack is probably a perfect companion for this, since that, yeah, they're both made by me and they're both 70s and 80s inspired. So that's probably enough about the titles. Have a look around. There's plenty of little gold nuggets. Let's look at these things. What is that? That is what we're calling a detail. So if we go into text edit here, you can see it says details credits. Now there's a whole folder full of these things, and I've placed some of them in these compositions so you can easily just switch it off, or you can replace it with another detail. They're all pretty interchangeable. So we'll go down to C, details, and we've got, I might click through a few of them. We've got this little copyright one down the bottom, change any of this text by just clicking on it, changing it. We've got this credits one, which you just saw. Again, you can change any of this text. It's literally just a text layer. We've got the lightning comp, which has lightning in it. This one's called line. It's got a guide layer here, which you don't have to worry about. You can just, flick that off. And the fun thing about this one actually is that when you change the text, there's always going to be that little separation gap, which is useful. So that one's fun. Then we've got Roman numerals, which again, Roman numerals, that's the Roman numeral for 2021. Here's a detail called shapes, which is used in imminent threat, and they're literally just shapes that kind of animate around. And then the VHS logo, which I spoke about, which you can use wherever. This is shape layers, so it's vector. The other thing we have in the details is something I use in a bunch of the compositions is different letterboxes. So obviously I would prefer to use Ezra Cohen's letterboxes from his site, but if you don't already have those, these are a cheap alternative just using masks. So here's a 16:9 kind of rounded box. Here's a 4:3 square box. Here's a kind of cinemascope look, and here's a 4:3 rounded box. Another thing, if we look in our compositions, is looks. Now, this is where I've gone, hey, maybe you want to chuck footage in, make it look VHS-esque or 60mm-esque and not have any titles. So 2 minutes long at the moment, and you can extend that. So all of these looks share one look footage comp. So we're going to just chuck in our footage to here. I've got Cowgirl, she back, y'all. And now we can go into look one. I haven't left anything shy here. I've just left it all hanging out so you can see what's really going on. But pretty much you drag look footage into there and you can go straight to the export phase. So if you know that it's only, 10 seconds long, right? So you get to there. Then when you jump out to look one, it's going to be at the same point over here, 10:04. See how I did that? So let's say that maybe our footage that we want is only 2 seconds 19. When I jump out to look one, it's going to have moved the cursor to 2 seconds 19. So all I have to do is drag the, what we would call the in and out point if you're in Premiere or Final Cut, and then you just go up to export. And it's pretty simple. So let's look through some more looks. This is look two. It's like a even more distressed VHS. Again, we've got an RGB split here. We've got red, green, and blue blurring, kind of phasing. And then we've got some diffusion filter kind of look here with the footage to give us this kind of red glow when we get to the highlights. We got some flickers. We got a whole bunch of blurs. We got some grain. We got a displacement line moving down the screen. There's just a whole lot of goodness in here. So have a look around. Look 4 is in 16:9. It's not a VHS one. It's more of like a 16mm look. Again, look 5 is more of your 60s look with rounded letterbox in there. Again, you can just turn that off if you want to. Look 6 is a bit more of a modern look. It's kind of holding on to the skin tones, boosting those and giving us some nice cyans. I've got a letterbox on there at the moment. Harder to tell with this black background version, but that one looks really cool. And then look 7 is kind of more of a grungy 16mm, almost like 8mm or something. Pretty punk rock. Okay, let's wrap it up there, but there is more to see. So please grab nostalgia. The project file is layered with goodies. Tell us what you think, DM us, tag us in any time that you use it on Instagram. And if you like this kind of thing, be sure to subscribe to Ezra Cohen on YouTube. Maybe subscribe to me on YouTube as well. My name is Grant M Fletcher. Thank you very much for joining me. And as always, happy editing, guys.